Hello, everybody. Today I'm going to be talking about the SHSAT, some aspects of it. I also just set up some new software, so let me lower my microphone on the computer here. So hopefully that goes okay. I'm live streaming through OBS, so I want to make sure this is going to work. Let me see if I can chat. Okay, that seems okay as well. Just make sure the software is okay. All right, I believe I have a lag going on for about 10 seconds. So first of all, congratulations to everybody for enduring the whole practice times. Some students took the test today in the morning and the afternoon. Today's Saturday, October 18th. So congratulations to all those kids. So I'm hoping to talk about two things today, and lots of software fails. I have a little gap time right now, and I've been testing about a bunch of things, and it actually crashed on me twice. So I'm not sure how far we're going to get into this discussion. In particular, I'm loading. I'm going to load some material through the screen. That's going to come on either on top of me. I'm going to move my picture to the side or off the screen completely. So let me just give me 1 second here, because I wanted to. I'm just verifying. So there's a lot of aspects to taking the SHSAT. A lot of studying. Mainly it's about English and math, but there's also test-taking strategies and other things. I left a YouTube video the whole week with a bunch of general advice that was not about subject material. It was just test-taking strategies, how to approach the test, pacing, psychology of it, administration things like getting your ticket and so on. So a bunch of kids are going to take the test again tomorrow. They're also going to take it again November 1st, November 3rd, and November 18th. So this is probably a bunch of kids. There's also going to be another test date in August for kids who are not currently residents of New York City. So, okay, this is lagging on me. So I'm not sure it's actually working. I had a few people who said they were going to join me live. That would be nice to know that this is okay, because the thing here was green before, and now it's red and yellow, or whatever. So I want to make sure it's okay. I also want to make sure I address some of the questions of some of the students who had emailed me. Some of them had just contacted me, so I don't know where they went. Alright, so far the stream seems to be up though. In fact, I'm going to try to bring it up on a screen by itself, because this is, as much as I'd like to inform people, this is also a test going on here. Let's see, I don't show it showing up here, although sometimes it doesn't naturally come to the top. Let me do for today. Yeah, it's showing a live stream showing up. Let me just bring that up to see, make sure it's actually coming up. In fact, I want to see what the delay is. I'm going to raise my hand. 1002, 1003, 1004, 1005, 1006, 1007, 1008. Okay, so we have about a 9-second delay, it looks like. So between your comments and what I'm showing on the screen, I'm trying to figure out how to get that, remove that delay. It may be that it's not possible with YouTube Live. I've done other video things where there was no delays, and in other cases there was 30-second delay. Those were mainly talking, not showing material, but that's still significant. Okay, one more second. and I'd rather get an audience here, including the kids who said they needed the help. So again, for kids taking it tomorrow, make sure you didn't do anything too wild today. Make sure you're going to eat a pretty standard, not off the wall dinner. You don't want to get an upset stomach. You're going to go to bed at the right time. You're probably going to set 2 alarms. You're going to wake up. Hopefully you did a trial run to your testing location. You're going to bring 2 pencils, an eraser, hopefully a white eraser, the Statler kind of eraser. You're going to bring your ticket signed. You're going to have your specialized high schools bubble sheeted in the priority order, because you're going to be redoing that once you get there. The only time your SHSAT schools are recorded is on your actual test. When you get there, they're going to corral you into different rooms. If you need to, please go to the bathroom then, because that gives you one shot to go to the bathroom another time. Let's see what else. Just remember to breathe through the test. It is an anxious time. The test is not the most pleasant thing in the world. On the same note, it's pretty exciting. So okay, it says I have 2 watchers. Anybody out there? Because I prefer answering your questions directly. That way I can guide to where you're having issues and contentions. Okay? And I'm just checking out some of these other aspects of this here. Again, I left a lot of this on your on the other things tomorrow, especially if you go in the afternoon. Make sure you go a little earlier than that, so that you're leaving enough time to be able to do things like that. So in the stream, I kind of wanted to talk about 2 things. One is hopefully maybe being able to get through a poetry example, and looking at basically a way to approach that. That said, it's kind of really no different than all the passages. They all create unique problems, just that most people seem to frown upon poetry. Same thing happened in the New York State testing, that poetry wasn't always added. Now that they're adding more formal types of literature, people seem to be having a tough enough time. I guess the real issue is that with the passages, you have to you're trying to apply meaning to what some of it is about. And when you have a poem, there's like another level of indirection there, because the poem is using figurative language often, and you have to do an interpretation on top of what you would normally be interpreting in plain English. So there's an extra level of complexity there. Okay, I'm going to delete this other stream because I don't want it to lag what's happening. I'm running these both through the same machine. Okay, so far nothing has died. Give me 1 second, because I'm checking stuff in the meantime. Alright, so what I'm going to try to do is jump into talking about the pacing of the questions. Let's see if we can get that to work properly. So I'm going to put Squish Me down here. Don't know if I'm showing up anymore. Let me just make sure that makes sense. So this is the 2018-19 SHSAT handbook. So if we notice through here, it's split into 57 English questions. And whoop, that didn't work. Okay, let me undo that. I thought I tested this before I started this out, but okay, so that's not going to work. Let me just do this then. You have 57 English questions and 57 math questions. Okay? And they're broken down into various ways. Also notice this here, that out of the 57 questions, 10 of them are field questions. And you don't know which 10. So one strategy as you're making your way through the test is just to skip questions that seem hard, because you might be spending time on a question that isn't even part of the test. It's part of the test in the sense that it's there, but it's not part of the test in the sense that it's not going to count. So only 47 questions out of the 57 are going to count. The others are called field test questions. Personally, I call them distractors, because you have a timed test that you're trying to get through. In the meantime, there's 10 questions, 10 out of 50. That's 20% of the whole test is on questions that you will not be graded on, and yet you're under pressure. And it might be that those 10 questions are the ones that throw you off. So that's not really fair. Okay, so that's one thing to be concerned about and think about. Okay, give me 1 second again, because I'm still trying to check something here. Okay, so everything seems all right so far. Okay, so the other is, if we look at how it's split apart. So in the math we start out with 5 grading questions and 52 multiple choice questions, which gives us the 57 questions. And some of the 10 field questions could be the gridded ones as well. In fact, for all we know, all the field questions, all 5 of the gridding questions could all be field questions. Okay? So you have 180 minutes, at least most students do. If you have an IEP and you're not taking it tomorrow, you have about 5 hours to take the test. So let's say double the time, or 90% more of the time. So that's a lot more time to do stuff with. Remember too that if you finish the test early, that you're not supposed to be able to leave. So you want to use the 3 hours wisely, and you want to use it completely. Alright? So you have 57 gridding questions. So if you take about a minute a question, there's 114 questions altogether. So that means it's something like 1.56 minutes a question on average. The problem with that is that you have to, the multiple choice ones are technically easier than the math ones. Okay, let me check one more thing again. So the multiple choice math questions are technically easier, because in the worst case you can brute force some of them, and in the second case they can be so hard you might just skip them. So you have about 90 minutes to split between each subject, although personally I don't think that's a good way to do it. You should figure out where your strengths and weaknesses are, and after you took so many practice tests, you should really know what's going on. Okay? So, so with that in mind, if your strength was, say, in math, and you think you can complete most questions, then you should go and do the math first. Okay, and you can skip back and forth on both. There's no prescribed order in the 114 questions. You can do question 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. You can answer every even one and then answer every odd one. You could do just the gridding of the math and go back to the grammar of the English, and then go back to the multiple choice of the math, and go back to the revision part of the English and finish the math, and then go back to the passage of the English. You can gyrate back and forth on all this. The truth of the matter is, most of us are better in one subject or the other. So because there's a curve in the score, the way the scoring is done, the math has a curve placed against it independently of the ELA, and the ELA has a curve placed against it independently of the math. and then the two independently scored and weighted curved scores are added together to give you a composite score. So the truth of the matter is that means that the more questions you answer in the subject that you're stronger on, the higher your overall score is going to be. There's been enough studies that have showed that, for instance, you can get 80 in both parts, and your score will be less than getting, say, a 95 on one part and a 75 on the other part, or maybe a 70 is a better example. So when the curve happens, your score gets changed. So when we look at these 57 questions here, right, on each section, again, ignoring the fact that 10 don't count, they're not going to be part of your SHSAT score because they don't count. They don't get added in. The field questions don't get added in. The way it works, this curve works, is that when you get to about question number 40, you've answered about 40 questions correctly. That the points per question get to be worth more. It's also true of the first few questions you answer. So let's say question 1 to 10 are worth 10 points each. Or questions, the first 10 questions you get right are worth 10 points each. Okay? And you can answer these in any order. As long as you're getting 10 correct, let's say they're all worth 10 points each. Then from, say, question 10 to 35 or 40 are worth about 4 points each. And then from 40 and above, they go back to be worth 10 and more. I think some are worth 15, and I think like the last two questions are worth about 20. So as you can see, there's a curve based on the number of questions you answer. So I mentioned that question number 40 is basically your cutoff point on that. That doesn't mean answering question 1 through 40. It just means answering 40 correctly answered questions. And then as you continue doing that, your score will improve based on that. So you can answer from question 57 backwards and go to question 30. In the meantime, you may have answered 20 properly questions. So it's not the question number. It's the number of questions you've answered properly that's based on it. So you want to get to that 40 correct on at least one section. Because once you bust that number, the points per answered question are going to go higher and higher and higher, by exponentially per se. Because a lot of people like to say, oh, each question is worth 1 point. Yeah, that's the raw score, but the scaled score is different, and it's the scaled score that counts, right? So if you have 57 questions, 114 altogether, it's not 1 point each, and it's based on the number of questions you properly answer. So that's significant. So you want to take whichever your strongest is in and get that section done first. Probably the whole thing. And it depends on the person, because you may be horrible in the grid-ins and perfect in the multiple choice ones. Figure out your pacing, figure out your strategy. And I'm focusing on the math questions right now, but it can be true of the ELA part as well. Okay? Okay, let me just check that the stream is still going live. Yes, it implies that it is. The stream is still going live, and I could see it. So, so the math is pretty clean cut in the sense that there's the 52 multiple choices, and either you get them or you don't, and they're little snippets of problems that are separated all by themselves, so that you can figure out how to get through them. So if you're good on all the probability ones, then you'll get them. If you're not good on the trigonometry or the geometry ones, or whatever the case may be, the fraction ones or the decimal ones, then you don't have that choice, and you can easily skip them. With the ELA part, it's harder to distinguish exactly what you're being tested on. At least for most students your age, it is. There's still 100 topics in each side, in the ELA side and the math side, and they don't ask every subtopic every year, but there's a commonality group, a common group within both subjects that they ask every year. So there's things like that. Okay. So you want to figure out which of these two you're best at, and do most of that, minus issues you have problems with. So for instance, you may have problems with the math grid-in questions. So maybe you want to do all the multiple choice first, and then go to the ELA, and then come back to the math grid-ins. Similarly on the ELA, if you're expert in passages or you're experts in the revision or expert in the raw grammar part, just do those. Get them over with. Your goal is to get the greatest number of points in the fastest amount of time. And again, if you're supposed to be answering things at 1.57 seconds, 1.57 minutes each, this is a tough call. So that's why I'm saying we're talking about 180 minutes divided by 2, which is 90 minutes each, and somehow you're going to split it up. But don't take that 90 number literally, because if you can truly get through the math 1 minute each, then you've done it in an hour, and theoretically you have an extra half an hour. So you have 2 hours then to do the ELA. Okay? So, does anybody have any questions about that so far? Let me try to flip back into here to see what we have going on here. All right. Okay. So the next thing is, if we look at some of what's going on here with the ELA is a little more bumpy situation than the math was. So we have 9 to 11 revision questions. Okay, not 9, not 10, and not 11, but 9 to 11, and it assesses various things. And we have the ELA split into the Part A, which is the grammar and the revision editing, and then the single passage question things. So the reading comprehension part has about 46 to 48 questions. So if you add the 48 and the 11, or let's say 10 or 9, because it could be 46 plus 9, you can get the 57 out of that. So it doesn't mean 11 plus 48 gives you 59. There's not that many questions. So it varies. And if you look at something like this here, what says 6 texts, this is the passages, followed by 6 to 10 questions. It doesn't mean there's 60 passage questions, because it could also go down to 36. So it means every year some passages might have only 4 or 5 questions, and some might have 9 or 10 questions. Depends on the exact passage and what they're trying to get out of you guys. Okay? So there's that. And in particular, there was a change from last year. Well, 2 years ago, this whole revision part and the grammar part didn't even exist, and it was scrambled paragraphs and sequencing things. I personally love those, and I think they provided a skill set that was important for a SHSAT school. However, other people differed on that, and what they tried to do was to match the Common Core curriculum that New York City and New York State are currently providing. I don't think they necessarily succeeded in that. On the same note, some remnants of it still exist. For instance, the scrambled paragraph may have gone away, but we also have questions in the passages now, like which sentence should be removed or which sentence should be added. That's very different than how do we revise this sentence. Okay? So anyway, we used to have 20 questions that they added last year, and this year they made it a smaller number. So it kind of indicates to me that a lot of kids had problems, and there's a problem here that even though the curriculum is supposed to apply to the Common Core ELA curriculum, it turns out that New York City really doesn't teach it. Historically, New York City doesn't teach spelling. Historically, New York City doesn't really teach grammar. It's only the past year or so that they really started throwing that in. Most students have no idea what a verb is, or past participle, or things like that. So whatever. Okay. Now, and last year there was 5 to 6 informational texts, which is normally the way it worked. So this year there's only 3 to 4 of them, and one is a literary prose text, and one is going to be a poem. Okay, and the poem was the killer, everybody. So this here talks about what the categories of some of those are. Okay, and I think there's a few pages down, where they split some of that up too. Let me see here. By the way, this is the point where this crashes where I've been moving this around. So hopefully we stay okay. Let's see, where is that? Okay, so these are some of the genres of the reading comprehension part. So the informational genre is going to include the left-hand side and the literary genres. So poetry is a given, and there might be 1 or 2 more on the right-hand side than previously in the past. They're trying to make these things less less made-up nonsense garbage than actual formal writing from known authors and so on, classic literature and things like that. Okay, although some of it may still follow suit. And remember, even though some of the passages can just be adventure things, we could also have a memoir or something out of a newspaper or somebody's personal essay or a copy of something from a speech and things like that. So, okay, so let's come back to this. So what we have is, if we come back to here, again, if we work on this 90 minutes aspect, if we have 6 passages, whoops, I don't know what's going on here. We have 6 passages, and we have above here, over here, we have about 10 of these revision grammar editing questions. Okay, the problem is that out of those 9 to 11 questions, some are straight up questions where they give one sentence and you're supposed to reply to that directly. Some of the questions relate to passages though, but there's a different meaning in the normal passages of the reading comprehension section. Okay, let me just double check that this is still going. Okay, it is. Okay, it's a different set of passages. With the reading comprehension, you really need to know the meaning. You really need to know the main idea. You really need to know things. With the revision editing, that's less strong, and there's an argument to be made that it's weaker, but I think that's a false argument. That said, when some of the questions about the passages involve a comma or something like that, that kind of does make it easier. And the problem with something like getting back to the poem, and by the way, I haven't seen any mention of the grammar section or the revision editing applying to poems. First of all, poems are often written grammatically incorrect on purpose, and the revising editing wouldn't make sense to. And make sure you know how to read a poem as a sentence, because a stanza can be split up in different ways. In fact, some kids don't even know what a stanza is. A stanza is basically a paragraph within the poem itself, and depending on the type of poem it is, like if it's a haiku, it doesn't really follow any grammatical reasoning or whatsoever, except for the grammar and the syntax of what a haiku is. All right, and that's part of why a poem is a little more obtuse. It can be very deep, including with the figurative stuff, but even without the figurative stuff, just the way it's set up, and it's a little more romantically composed and things like that. Okay, so anyway, let's get back to this. We have 10 questions, let's say on average 9 to 11, and we have about 47 here. So we have 6 passages, and there's usually about 2 passages stuck in here. So that's 8 passages altogether, and maybe 5 questions about passages and 5 are not about passages. So we have to figure out how to divvy this up. So if you just use raw numbers, that whether ELA is your strength or not, and we work back that you have about half an hour. You work back and forth that you have about an hour and a half to do each section. It can be a tough one. So if we back off and look at it, and we figure if we spend 8 to 10 minutes per passage in the reading comprehension part, and also about 8 to 10 minutes on the 2 passages, or that will probably be in the revision editing part. Okay, that's going to give us about 80 minutes. That's an hour and a half, because 90 minutes is an hour and a half. Realizing you're going to have your brain's going to pop 1 or 2 times during the test. You might go to the bathroom, and there's going to be a couple of questions that are going to be harder, that are going to take you longer than a minute. So when it all balances out, that's kind of the time I would suggest that you use. Okay, about 8 minutes per text. And if there's 6 questions, so you're still doing about a minute a question. And if you back off of that logic too, when you look at it, you have 114 questions. If you take a minute each, that's 114 minutes. And you're talking about something like an hour and 45 minutes or something like that. And that gives you about 5 to 10 minutes to read the passages. And if there's a bunch of them, that's a half an hour when it all adds up. So if you take the hour and 45 minutes, or maybe it's 2 hours and 15 minutes, whatever that number comes to be, you add the half an hour, and you're pretty much getting close to the 3 hours. Now, all this said and done too, a lot of students don't finish the test. There's a lot of questions that you're leaving answered. You want to leave that last 15 minutes of the test, by the way, and you better bring a watch. It could be a regular watch. The proctor will put numbers on the boards based on the time, but in the last 15 minutes, you want to make sure that your bubble sheeted everything in and your bubble sheet is clean, because at some point you won't be able to answer some questions on either section or the grid-ins, and your goal is to answer all questions even if you don't know the answers. Stop making educated guesses, and if you need to, just fill in one of the 4 bubbles. It doesn't matter which. It's said that you don't get penalized for not answering a question. That's true to a certain extent, but it's not true to the extent that if you don't know the answer and you can randomly guess it through logic or deduction or ruling out the bad answers, or just actually randomly circling one of the 4 choices, you may actually get the points for that. So, and that's the goal, is to get as many points as you possibly can as a test-taking strategy. Right, figurative language is confusing. Okay, sorry, I have a few screens loaded here, the way the software is working for me here. So hello everybody, and I'm bouncing back and forth between screens because one is easier to read than the other. So first of all, can everybody hear me? And can you read the screen as you're seeing it? Because on my side I can, but I don't know if some of you are looking at through phones and stuff like that. And what I hope to be able to do is do the second part, actually giving a poem example. Eyes? What does eyes mean? Eyes, yes. Okay. The eyes have it. Okay. So is there any questions about anything I'm saying about pacing any of this at the moment? And of course, pacing is based on your skill. You know your strengths. You know your weaknesses. And after taking so many practice tests, I hope some of you took many of them, because that's part of what this is about. It's just getting used to test taking. This, even though you've taken the New York State tests, some of you may have taken some Regents, but some of you probably haven't. The Regents is a big benefit to have taken to enter into this, not only to have that experience, but some of that math and so on, and some of that English applies to all this too. So that's important as well. So anyway, you know your strengths and weaknesses, and you already know where you need to go. And there's certain questions, for instance, if you don't know how to do a probability, then just skip every single one of those. There's not 50 probability questions. There might be at most 5. And I bet of those 5 you can answer one of them. So at worst you're left with 4 that you're guessing. And again, you can go backwards. And you can go backwards and through deduction and so on figure some of that. You just finished the SHSAT. Yeah, how was it? Tell us how it was. How many geometry questions there were. They don't do it that way. There's always a few of them though. There's enough geometry on every single test, especially in grade 9. Depends what grade you're taking it for. And by the way, if anybody wants extra experience to reinforce their mathematical knowledge, even if you're taking the grade 8 test, it's still worth taking the grade 9 examples just to get that under your belt. Because the grade 9 incorporates all the grade 8 stuff. And if you can solve the harder problems, you can definitely solve the easier problems. Yeah, so, but in any event, that's going to be part of your strategy. If you know you're weak in geometry, then leave those for last. Put question marks next to them. I'm big on coding your test. Use different codes means you know it was correct with a check mark. even as far as writing all the answers down on your test sheet and circling them. Because if your bubble sheet gets somehow out of sync, you want to be able to recreate your bubble sheet like snap decision, right on the spot. Okay? By the way, notice everything we've talked about so far, even though we're talking about math and ELA, we're just talking about strategy and logic and how to apply this and how to beat the system, so to speak. Okay? So there's all that. So does anybody have questions about the general aspects that I'm talking about here? Really, I can't answer something specifically because what I need to do as a tutor is literally sit down with some of you and figure out where you're going to or not going to on some of this, because some of this is conceptual and some of it's real. Okay, that's good if you know trig algebra 2, especially the algebra 2 part, because you're going to have some ways to solve some problems that some of the kids now don't know how to do. And critical thinking is really what this test is about. We could argue it's testing ELA and math knowledge, but it's really testing your ability to adapt, to make sure you're rigorous, to make sure that you're able to think out of the box, that you're a creative thinker, that you're a critical thinker, that you're doing all these other kinds of things, that you have some level of intellect and intelligence that you can apply to solve novel problems that are written. In fact, I believe that's actually in the handbook. Give me 1 second. I think I can find that. Okay. The SHSAT contains many questions that require mathematical skills to respond to novel situations. They're basically giving you unique permutations of some of the questions. Okay? And they want to see if you can apply out of the box creatively and things like that. All right, so does anybody have any questions of anything else we're talking about? I took the test last year. There was a weird shape that looks like a hexagon. Wait, something's freaking out on my screen. Did I just lose? Is my video still there, guys? There was a weird shape that looks like a hexagon minus a triangle. Yeah, it's just a polygon, and they're going to ask about angles probably, right? And you have to realize how many angles are within a hexagon. What's the total amount of angles within a hexagon? Things like that. Yeah. Because normally, most of the shapes we're used to, and you get taught in class, are called regular whatevers. You might have a regular quadrilateral, which it's standardly going to look like a square, a rectangle, or a parallelogram. But you can have some weird looking stuff too. Imagine there's a dent in it, so to speak, or a parallelogram with the top slanted, so it's not a parallel. That's not a parallelogram anymore. So most of the things we're given in class are regular stuff. I guess on 4 passages since I ran out of time. Yeah, and time management is one of the things. That's what I'm trying to break down here. And part of it's just pacing, part of it's knowledge of the subject, and part of it's strategy, figuring out what your strengths and weaknesses are, and just skipping the ones that you just know that you ran out of time learning. Or in some cases, it's very hard for different people to learn different things. So that's part of what your choice, and what may work for me may not work for you. That's why it's important as a tutor for me to actually literally sit down. I can give general advice I can give you now, but it's a different story to actually sit with you and see how you're actually thinking. I need to crawl into your brains to give you personal advice. That's true whether you're a baseball player or whatever too. Teaching you how to run or ice skate or hit a ball. Depending on the person, there's different skills. A shorter player is going to play different than a taller player. You're going to give them different ways to run and different ways to hit the ball. So this is just as true. Okay. All right. So are there any? Right. So what about the general pacing questions? Is there any more specific ones, or about anything I talked about so far? Any thoughts on that? What is the Common Core standards, or you're using the Common Core standards? What grade level questions? I'm not sure what you're stating or asking there. In other words, what are the topics? I can give you specific math topics. Is that what you're asking for? I don't know if it's a complete list, but I can give a pretty good subset of it. Well, you're getting taught algebra since you're in second grade or whatever. It's just building up to when you finally get to eighth grade that you're finally learning really what a symbol is and how to think conceptually about it. Whereas previously you were just being told stuff like x equals 5 or something. Right, you've been learning pre-algebra all your life. You're just building it up. Of course, the SHSAT has the questions. Jane is twice the age of Bob, who was 3 years younger, and in 2 years he'll be five difference and all this other stuff like that. Plus the linear equations and things like that. And some of it gets worse in the grade 9. Okay, so we're going 41 minutes. Should we flip over to maybe a poetry example, and blow all our minds? Hang on 1 second. So you should be spending about eight minutes on each of the passages. Am I taking the test tomorrow? No, I'm not. Oh, the other person. Is the 8th grade Regents and the SHSAT the same difficulty? No, they're different animals. They're testing different things. There will be some common questions on both tests. There's surprisingly number of simple questions from time to time. I just helped one with somebody today. It was like 2w minus 8w equals 5 or something, or whatever it was, and it was just that simple to just do, where you subtracted the w's and divided by something, and just got a simple number. That's on all tests. All tests always ask predecessor information. Yeah, I think the SHSAT is definitely harder as well. Absolutely. That said, the 8th grade Regents test different things. There's stuff on the SHSAT that is not on the 8th grade Regents, and there's stuff on the 8th grade Regents which is not on the SHSAT. And by the way, it's actually the 9th grade Regents. So it's technically a high school class. Because what you're doing in 8th grade is learning 8th grade math plus the extra math to pass the Regents. In some cases, it's done in 7th grade as well, depending on which middle school you go to. Okay, let me just see here if I wrote down some notes here. Remember to read all directions. That's part of your reading too. So should we try an actual poetry example? Everybody's so scared they're not even going to say to try that. So I want to see if this app or whatever is going to crash as well. Okay, so everybody's cool on how the ELA is split down and some logic to applying a strategy to that. Again, you're going to have a watch. What you're not going to do is stop at every passage and see what time it is. You're going to pace things maybe 15 minutes at a time, half an hour at a time, both. Every 15 minutes, just be on the alert of where you're at. Because what happens sometimes is you're anxious, you're taking this special test, it's exciting, and you can get caught up on one question, even on the ELA part, where you realize you just spent 5 to 10 minutes on it. And when you do that, what you're doing is, because if you're supposed to be averaging a minute a question, and you spent 5 to 10 minutes on another question, let's say in one case it's 10 minutes, you could have answered 9 other questions and got all those answers correct. So you need to get a grip on yourself, and that was what part of the practice was about, is to learn how you did stuff like that. Because not only like if you sat down with somebody like me as a tutor, or Tyler Tutor or something, and he does this online, going through the examples, that's all great and that's fine and dandy. Actually, it's pretty wonderful. The other side of the coin is you should have done a whole simulation. You should have sat down and taken a whole test and done it a few times. There's so many past tests that you could work this through. There's so many good quality books out there, or at least reasonably quality books, that there's no reason you shouldn't have done that. And you were supposed to find your strengths and weaknesses as you did each one. You're not just taking all the examples in isolation and saying, oh, I got 560, and taking it again and saying, I got 550, taking it again and saying, I got 570. You're supposed to be finding out which category of things you're getting wrong and why, and fixing those problems. You're not just throwing dots against the wall here, guys. Okay? There's a strategy and logic to all this, because that was the point, is to improve not just by getting a particular question right, because there's lots of patterns in the questions too. So the more practice you did, the more patterns you were. There's always one asking somebody's twice somebody else's age and this and that. That's always there. There's always a probability one with the chart about kids having cats and dogs, and that a population problem, it's called. There's always one of those, and as you get used to those, there's always one where you're picking something out of a bag, either multiple times or one time, and you have to figure out the probability. There's always something involving a factorial, etc., etc. So you're supposed to be finding the patterns there and getting them right for the next time you do it. And realize sometimes that those patterns can be evolved. If you remember fact families from back in 3rd and 4th grade, 5th grade or whatever, like 3 times 4 is 12. They're a fact family. So you could say 3 times 4 is 12. You can also say 4 times 3 is 12. The same fact family says 12 divided by 4 is 3. That's a different way. So you're taking some of these problems, looking at them as a rubric cube, and you're twisting them, and you're reformulating them a different way. In fact, I noticed there was one example that involved a code, the word rain, where 2 digits were the same and you had to shift it. And now I notice it got moved from a multiple choice question to a grid-in problem. So so anyway, you have these basic problems, even if the numbers change, or even if it's the same question, that they're just taking and they're twisting a little, they're giving a little tweak, and it becomes a new fact family question, if you will. Okay? Yeah, here's the problem. You do need to rush because the test is only 3 hours. You need to pace yourself. You need to keep moving, and that was part of what the practice was about. I have a watch, a digital watch. Yeah, 3 hours is a lot of time, but it isn't. I use the auto problem solving on YouTube. Yeah, and it's easy to break things down once you understand the big picture. Because what you want to do is you want to do it at the atomic level. You do want to solve problems by themselves, isolated. So if you see question number 30, answer question number 30 for what it is or isn't. But you also want to back off of the test and solve it as a whole big mass, a whole big blob. And that ties into your pacing and your approach and other things like that. Independent of the topic. This is true of all tests. Okay? Alright, so let's come back to here. Okay, what I'm going to try to do is add in another thing into this streaming software. So let's see if this works. Give me a second. It may crash something. So let's see what happens. Okay, does everybody see the butterfly screen? Can everybody read that? Okay, I believe it just popped into mine, so. Okay, the problem is I'm not sure how to get it to fit on the screen. I can actually shrink it down, but I'm not convinced that's totally going to work. Oh yes, that did work. The question is it too small for you guys to see? I'm not sure how the software adapts to this properly. Is everybody able to read that? Or is it now too small? Okay, so I'm flipping out. I can't see what you guys are saying. So this part here is called the stanza. That's stanza number 1. This is stanza number 2. This is stanza number 3. And this is stanza number 4. So that's number 1. Number 2 is that there's numbers along the side of here. These are the same as the passages. This is line number 5, and down here is line, whoops. This is line number 10. That's the second thing. The third thing is there's a little number stuck here, okay, and a little number stuck here. Okay, if you go to the bottom of this, and I'll expand it back out again. That refers to it refers to a footnote. So it's given us definitions for what a geranium is, and it's given us definitions for what a crystalline is. Sometimes that's a hint to the answer. Sometimes it's just not. Sometimes they're just using an advanced word and giving you a distraction or something like that. Okay, so that's the third thing. The fourth thing is when we view how these are set up, like this first stanza. Okay, we notice this ends in an exclamation, this ends in a comma, this ends in an exclamation. But if we go to the second stanza, this is not the end of a sentence. Snow has the end of a sentence. Okay? Again, warm, it's not the end of a sentence. This is the end of a sentence. So we like to read this a line at a time, but the truth of the matter is this whole thing is the first sentence of the second stanza, and this whole thing is the second sentence of the stanza. Sometimes it's easy to just read, for instance, this for what it is, and this for something else. But a sentence is connecting a bunch of thoughts together, not just the subject and the predicate, but something with meaning. Okay? The same thing here. That said, sometimes a poem was written in a specific way. Like in a comma, we pause. And we probably pause at the end of this. We might pause at the end of that. We might pause at the end of that. Okay? But just make sure you know what you're reading when you're doing this kind of stuff. Okay? All right, let me flip back to the regular screen and see what's going on here. I'm hella scared. It's all right to be scared. Yeah, you need one of these guys then. Give me 1 second. Wait a second. This is not working right. Oh wait, here we go. Wow, YouTube is slow on some of this. Okay, so if we come back to here, I'm going to shrink it back down. So what I like to do is figure out the main idea or something. So there's a couple of hints to doing that. It works with passages, and it kind of works with poems too. The problem is a poem has the competition between literal language, which means explicitly what it says, and figurative language, which is symbolic and open to interpretation. But if we start from the top, and this will work with the passages, by the way, too. The title of this thing is Butterfly. So it had better be something about butterfly. So what I like to do is take things a paragraph at a time and figure out what they're talking about. So you figure out there, you're going to figure it out on the second one, you figure it out on the third one, you're going to figure out on the whole one. When you reach the bottom, you're going to kind of think to yourself, what's the main idea? What's going on here? Okay? And you should do this definitely with the passage readings. And what you want to do is you're going to make a snap decision of what the main idea is. And hopefully the main idea reinforces what the title was in the case of a poem. Unfortunately, the passages in the reading comprehension part of the SHSAT do not have titles. At least they traditionally haven't. They do have titles in the revision part, though, so you're going to use that to your advantage there. So we're getting back to the main idea of something. So there's a few ways to figure out the main idea of something. Normally in the passage part, it's based on the title. It could also be the first sentence of the whole passage. It could also be the first paragraph of the whole passage. It might be in the first 2 paragraphs of the passage. And sometimes it's in the last paragraph instead. And sometimes it's actually the main idea of the passage is the very last sentence of the passage. And sometimes the main idea is never explicitly said and you have to interpret it. So there's a whole bunch of hints there. The main idea can also be in an illustration that's based on the passage that's referring to. The main idea, also some passages, normally they don't do this in the SHSAT, but they definitely do it on the state test. There might be a prelude kind of passage, a paragraph that's in italics, that sometimes says what's happening, or at least opens up the theme and the setting of what's going to be said in the passage. So you want to follow some of those same ideas when you look at a poem. Even though a poem has this extra level of indirection, the extra level being the figurative part. Okay? Everybody with me so far? Even though you're hella scared? Okay. So what we're going to just try to do is read each paragraph. Let me make it bigger, I guess. We're also going to see if there's some running theme through it. Because poems try to reinforce an idea. Okay, so we know it's about butterflies, we're not sure what. Butterfly, the wind blows seaward, strong beyond the garden wall. Butterfly, why do you settle on my shoe? The shoe? Okay. And sip the dirt on my shoe? Okay, that sounds weird. Maybe that's significant. Lifting your veined wings. Lifting them? Big white butterfly. Alright, so butterfly is just chilling out. It comes in the person's garden, apparently, or the garden that they're in. It goes on their shoe. I don't know, is that symbolic? It sips the dirt on their shoe. Is that symbolic? Lifting your veined wing. Lifting them? Big white butterfly. So we know it's a white butterfly. I don't know if that's significant yet. And he particularly points out the veins on the wings. And lifting them, question mark. Why? Are they heavy? Okay. Okay, next paragraph. Already is October, and the wind blows strong to the sea. Notice that they're talking about the wind up here. And the wind again over here. So already it is October, and the wind blows strong to the sea. From the hills where snow must have fallen, the wind is polished with snow. That's all one sentence. So, I'm starting to think, okay, my original viewpoint was this was somebody sitting out on their porch or in a garden in the summer. Now it's talking about October, and there's a wind again. So maybe the fall is coming, the winter's coming. Maybe the butterfly is going to run into a problem. It's talking about it's blowing strong to the sea. And by the way, up here, he also pointed out that it was blowing seaward. So maybe there's a pattern here, I don't know. So in any event, here in the garden with the red geraniums, and again it said a geranium was a bright, lively flower clustered in pink, red, or white. It is warm. It is warm, but the wind blows strong towards the sea. So again, this wind concept going towards the sea. White butterfly, content with my shoe. So again, he re-points out that the butterfly is in this warm garden, and there seems to be some storm brewing outside. He doesn't quite say it's a storm, but we know it's winds blowing strong, though. So is this symbolic, or is this something literal? And what's the deal with the shoe? That's getting me. It's also odd that he's saying it's so windy out, but that the garden's warm. Okay, so there's some conflicting information here. All right. All right. Wait a second. I'm on the wrong screen. So then we go to the third stanza. Will you go? Will you go from my warm house? So I guess the person's talking to the butterfly, asking the butterfly, is he going to fly off from the garden? Will you climb on your big soft wings, black dotted, as an invisible rainbow, an arch, till the wind slides your sheer from the arch crest, and in a strange level fluttering you out to seaward, white speck. Wow. So that's deep. That seems to be pretty deep. That is the butterfly going to leave the comfort and warmth of the garden to go into the big, ugly, bad world and just be a speck? Furthermore, since the wind is going to blow the butterfly seaward, is this the demise of the butterfly? Right? Is the butterfly doing something else? So we have to wonder about questions like that. And this is the kind of things that run through your head. And these should run through your head when you're doing math problems too. As you're reading the paragraph, the question, you're trying to interpret a sentence at a time, a phrase at a time. You're going to do the same thing with the ELA passages. There's a commonality through all this. So we're using the same strategies to read a math problem that we're using to read a poem. In fact, if you want to, think of a poem as a math problem. That you're trying to interpret something, right? The ELA we talked about was the non-poetry passages. We're still trying to interpret and get the meaning out of it. And we talked about the poem having another level of direction. But that's the issue with the math problems. When you have a word problem, we need to rip it apart and interpret it and break it down. So we're doing some of the same similar stuff here. Okay? So anyway, it's and then farewell, little soul, lost soul. Whoops. You have melted into the crystalline distance. And then crystalline meant clear, transparent. It is enough. I saw you vanish into air. So where did the butterfly go? Right? So we have stuff like that. So at the end, you may want to think, what is this all about? Does the butterfly die? Does it just go on its measly way in its long journey? What else is happening? And I'm still lost. I don't know what the guy's shoe has to do in any of this, but it's mentioned a few times. All right. Okay. There's a second butterfly poem, and then this thing I'm using here, they get compared. So what we're going to do is let's just focus on the questions involving this passage. Okay. And there must be a way for me to split this in half and put the question near where it's asking about, but I don't know how to do that at this point. So we're just going to have to bot back and forth and do the best we can. So 31 says, what is the impact of the phrase, the wind, throughout Lawrence's butterfly? So what seems to be the answer here? So while I was reading, I was basically interpreting some thoughts about the wind at the time. So when you're processing questions like this, first of all, you want to rule out the ridiculous one. There used to be 5 choices on the SHAT, which gave you 20% answer. Now there's 4, so you have a 25% answer. If you can rule out the ridiculous answer, you've gotten it down to 3. So you've gone to 33 and a third percent now. So which one seems to be the ridiculous one? So we're looking at 31. What is the impact of the phrase "the wind" throughout that passage? Okay, A says it represents the attractive coloring of the butterfly. The wind represents the coloring. No, he pretty much said it was white, and he called it a speck at one point, but not much else happened there. So I'm not sure that's a ridiculous answer, but it's certainly incorrect. Okay? Okay. It describes the motion made by the butterfly's wings. No, I don't think he ever talked about the butterfly's wings except for the color and it fluttering off. Normally when we think the vision of butterfly, it's fluttering about and almost seems like it's a little dizzy. And he just talks about the wind blowing seaward. If anything, it's going to take the butterfly and drag it along. Okay? So it doesn't seem to be that. C says it emphasizes the journey that the butterfly will take. Okay, that one seems interesting because I was mentioning is this about the lifelong progression of the butterfly? Is this the butterfly's demise? What's its next step? We don't know. We just know it flutters off and gets sucked out by the wind. Okay, so C is a possibility. Okay, and then D says it shows the butterfly's lack of response to the questions. Well, that's probably the ridiculous one, because the butterfly is not really going to ask. And this passage, even though it was figurative, it didn't really lend to the personification of the butterfly. The butterfly was just passive. It wasn't really an active participant. It wasn't even an active participant in itself. It seems like it landed there. It somehow got engrossed in the shoe, and it either flew off by on its own accord. But in any event, at the end of the day, it got sucked off by the wind. So the answer here would be C. It emphasizes the journey that the butterfly is taking. And that kind of hits home when we have this here. Farewell, farewell, lost soul. So the butterfly might be confused and so on. And then it just vanishes into the distance. And we also have reinforcing of stuff. Let's see. When he asks, will you go? Will you climb into the invisible rainbow? Isn't that really romantic? Sounds great, right? So we have some support there with phrases like that. Okay? Everybody with me so far? Anybody disagree with that? Okay, so the next question, which is the one that gives me the most quandary of this figurativeness, is the shoe. So, how does Lawrence use the repeated image of the shoe in the first two stanzas? Let's go back and read them. I'll make that a little bigger. So going from here to here. So despite everything else that's going on, the butterfly is happy with the shoe. And it settles on the shoe to sip the dirt. Okay? So that's odd. Okay, so let's go back to the question. Wait, this is not going to fit, so let me shrink it down. Okay, so am I at the right question? No, I'm not. Okay, how does Lawrence use the repeated image of the shoe in the first two stanzas? To represent the place that is familiar? I semi-buy that. I'm not sure about the dirt part, but okay. To create an image of movement? No, I don't think he's giving that. Though again, the wind is the thing giving the image of movement, not the shoe. To represent the memory of the past. I'm not convinced that is it. That's a super obtuse. So, but I'll give that a little credence. So I'm choosing between A and C, and to create a sense that anything is possible. No, the shoe doesn't seem to deal with that. So D is more like the ridiculous answer. So we're left to choose between A and C. And it seems to me when we use this concept of bestness, in this case, the best answer has to be A. Okay. So again, we're trying to process this, whatever. Right. So let's go to the next question. Okay, which statement best describes the contrast between the garden and the wind? So we have this nice warm garden. It almost seems wonderful and magical, right? And everybody seems content. The butterflies even happen to eat dirt off the guy's shoe. Normally it's sipping stuff out of nectar out of a flower, but it's content to actually be eating garbage off the guy's shoe. So we have the contrast between this wonderful magical place and the wind, which seems to indicate it's the demise of the butterfly, or if nothing, it's at least ripping the butterfly away from this calm, wonderful, warm, content place. Okay. So what I'm trying to do is answer the question without looking at the answers. Do that comparison, and that's another strategy to do this. And by the way, I didn't mention something. Another strategy is that when you're doing passages, read the questions before you read the passages. Read the questions before you read the passages. Okay? You're not looking at the answers, just read the questions. So we talked before there were 6 to 10 questions per passage. Read the questions so you have some idea what you're looking for. So you should have done that with the poems too, because the poem is also a passage. So go and read all the questions, not the answers, and then go in the passage so that when you're reading the passage, it might be in the back of your mind to remember it. And you're not going to spend hours trying to read the questions first. These are snap things you're doing. So if there's 9 questions, you might remember 6, and that's going to be a big help for you when you go to that. For some people, by the way, this is too much. It's too much processing. So for a few select people, that's not a good idea. That's why some of these strategies depends on the person, and you actually have to test them out. But for most people, reading the questions first helps. Okay? And remember not to skip important words. And when you read questions, even on the ELA, underline stuff. Underline stuff in the passage when you're reading it too. You're not writing a tome on the side of the thing. A lot of people, when they take the state test, do a lot of underlining, and they do a lot of writing on the side. You don't really have the time, and you can't afford that on this test. You need to retain a lot in your head. It doesn't mean not to put anything on the side, like a main idea, a phrase of the main idea for each paragraph, or in this case, the stanzas. And write a phrase at the end of the main idea of the whole thing. Not a paragraph, not a sentence, just a phrase. And it doesn't even have to capture the total 100% essence of the main idea, or whatever you're doing. And maybe this will help somebody too. I have one student, no matter what the passage is, he only underlines names and dates. And the importance of that is he makes an association between it. So it's not so much he's only remembering the dates and the times, but he's trying to make an association between what was in the sentences where those dates, the names and dates were mentioned. Okay? So you're going to go read that, and then, so here's, you get to a passage, you read the questions, you read the passage, then when you're doing the questions, you don't look at the answers. You try to guess the answer, and then you try to find the one that matches the one you're looking for. Okay? So let's go back to 33. Which statement best, and by the way, that's bold-faced. Okay? This, number 32, didn't use the word best. So this has an explicit best, and 32 and some other questions has an implicit best. You're always looking for the best answer. Always, always, always. Okay? And depending on the question, best has different things. Sometimes best is just like, what's that gut feeling of best? Sometimes best means which is the most precise. Sometimes best means which matches the spirit and tone of the article. If it's a very formal article and one of the sentences uses street talk, that's not going to match. Conversely, if the article was street talk and one of the answers seems perfect but uses really formal language, it's probably not the answer. It's probably not the best one because it's not matching the tone. So sometimes they actually say like most precise instead of the word best, and sometimes they just say best. So you have to figure this out by context. Okay? Okay, wait. I'm going to flip into here and see if anybody's asking any questions. Okay, Nana's saying that the answer might be D. Okay, so let's see. So let's go through. The garden is blooming, the wind is dying. We're never quite told the garden is blooming, although I think we have a mental picture that it's nice. The wind is dying. Well, it seems like there's no wind in the garden, but we keep talking about the strong wind blowing seaward, so it can't be A. Okay? The garden is weak. The wind is powerful. Well, we're never quite told about the garden completely, but my mental image is not a weak garden. It's a beautiful, nice-looking garden. That doesn't sound weak. It doesn't sound disheveled or wrecked or destroyed. The wind is powerful. Yes, that part's right. But the first half of B seems to rule it out. Okay. The garden is colorful. Well, if you go back to here, We know, at least from the geraniums, that they're bright, lively flowers. Now, we don't know if the garden only has geraniums in it, but certainly the garden is colorful. Let me go back to the question. The wind is white. No, we're told the butterfly is white. We're also told that the butterfly flies out into the crystalline issue, which is clear and transparent and cloudless. Clear and transparent is not white. It's clear. And we get that reinforced idea because it vanishes into the air. Vanishes into, quote, thin air. Right? So it's not that either. Where are we here? And the garden is safe. Right? The person narrating the poem is giving us that sense of that it's nice and warm and it's comfortable, and oh, poor little butterfly, won't you stay here, and stuff like that. And the wind is mysterious. It is. We don't know what it's going to bring. It's outside of this safe zone. It's blowing seaward. It's October. Who knows what's going to happen? Especially the butterfly that goes into thin air. It's mysterious. Where did the butterfly go? Did it get dragged out to sea and it dies? Does it get dragged to the next island? Is this part of its natural migration? We don't know. It's all mysterious. So definitely the answer is D. Very good, Nana. Okay, so we're going to move on to 34. In Butterfly, how does the info in the last stanza, not in the whole poem, and again, remember, stanza is basically the last paragraph, fit in with the other ideas of the poem? Okay, we've been talking about the other ideas since I started reading it, and as we're going over the questions. So, 34. Any guesses on that? So it's trying to compare what's being talked about in the poem and then specific with the last stanza. How does it fit with? How does it fit with the other ideas? Is it compatible? Is it incompatible? Does it keep going in that way? Is it supporting the other ideas that the poem talks about? Okay. So, let me see if you got, because I'm not looking at what you guys are saying. Okay, nobody said anything. Where's the thing there? So, it adds a new level of meaning by suggesting the speaker's acceptance of the butterfly's leaving. That's possible. It's possible. Okay. It shifts the focus by including images that describe the speaker of the poem instead of images of the butterfly. The last paragraph. Did you visualize the narrator? Farewell, farewell, my lost soul. You have melted. I saw you vanish into the air. The only thing is we know the person watched the butterfly go, but there's really no description of the person. So I mean, I do have a mental image of basically the person standing there waving goodbye to the butterfly, but my stronger image was the butterfly just dissipating into the horizon. Okay? It explains what the speaker hopes the butterfly will do if it leaves the garden. No, it doesn't even go there. If anything, it's because it's mysterious. The butterfly might not have a good situation once it leaves. Not that it really had a great one there anyway, because it was eating dirt out the guy's shoe. It offers a surprising conclusion because the speaker does not answer any of the questions in the earlier stanza. Yeah, that's true-ish, but I'm not sure I was surprised about this. I mean, first of all, it's not such a long thing here. The butterfly, we're not told the butterfly always lived there. We don't know that the butterfly was born there. It probably flew there 5 minutes beforehand, and it's gone at this point. So D is kind of 50-50 there, but it's not too strong. So it seems like the original thing that since we have this image of the speaker waving goodbye and perhaps pondering what the butterfly's demise or non-demise is, that A more or less gets us there. Okay? Everybody with me? A, okay. All right. So there's a second butterfly passage. We're going on an hour and 20 minutes, so I might as well do it. We'll just run through some of the same kind of perspectives here, because that's the question. And the next question, 2 questions about that, and then there's a question about both of them. Wait, how many more questions are there? 1, 2, 3. There's 3 more questions. The second poem was a little simpler, if I remember it right. So again, it's called The Butterfly. So we're going to think of the main idea. This, again, is the first paragraph, or the first stanza, it's formally called. The second stanza. The third stanza. And this whole thing is really the 4th stanza. And again, this is line number 5. This is line number 10. And if you notice, there's a supersetted 1 here again, which pertains to this, a pun. A clever form of playing with various senses or sounds of words. I think a lot of us know what puns are. And a couple of different interpretations might fall into there. So, actually, can I expand this? No, it doesn't fit anymore. Oh, wait, does it? No, it doesn't. Okay, the butterfly. There's no story behind it. It is split like a second. It hinges around itself. It has no future. It is pinned down to no past. It's a pun on the present. Wow, sounds like a free spirit to me. It's a yellow butterfly. Okay, we know the previous one was white. It has taken these wretched hills under its wings. Okay, and everybody know what wretched means? Kind of miserable hills, not good. Okay. Just a pinch of yellow. It opens before it closes, and closes before it. Where is it? Where did it go? All right, so give a second to read that all again. So let's go back to the questions. So again, instead of this is probably just like a simple statement that the author's trying to communicate. We're trying to figure out the main idea. There's some fluttering about. In the previous case, we know the butterfly went to the garden, and it kind of got dragged away by the wind, it sounded like, or at least when it flew out, the wind dragged it away. Here we kind of have a true visual image of a fluttering butterfly, especially this paragraph. Really seems to hit home on that. But the butterfly is a free spirit, and it's just taking it easy. And at some point, it's also gone. So at the end of both of them, the butterfly is missing. Where did it go? Why did it go? Okay. So let me just pop into here a second. Okay, which stanza? So there were 4 stanzas. Which most captures the freedom that the butterfly enjoys? So it's either 1, 2, 3, 4, A, B, C, D. Which most captures? So this is this best notion. Which best captures the freedom? Which is talking about the freedom that the butterfly has? So is it 1, 2, 3, or 4? Okay, it seems to me that because we're talking about, wait, where did that question go? The second one I emphasized repeatedly, that talked about the butterfly being a free spirit, that it would be B. Okay? Okay, 36. What is the effect of the unfinished word and the space between line 12 and 13? So they're asking, what's the effect here that this word, it was supposed to be open, and the blank line between that and where is it? What is the effect of that? Let's go see what they're talking about. Where is that question? What's the effect of the author having done that? It shows the reader that the poem was about to end? No, to me that just sounds ridiculous. Okay. It shows how suddenly the butterfly has disappeared. Yeah, he was about to say it opened it up and the next thing was gone. So B seems to strongly be it. It shows that the poet was interrupted by someone. That's certainly possible, but probably not, because once they were disinterrupted, because they finally put that remaining last line in. So that this C also sounds silly. It shows the poet forgot what he was going to say. Really? Okay, that's ridiculous too. So we have a super strong answer, and basically three other silly answers. Okay. Yeah, we're gonna wrap up in a second. We're on the last question. What main idea do the two poems have in common? Butterflies are beautiful. He doesn't say they're ugly or anything. But the other side of the coin is he mentions their color and kind of. I think we more have a mental image of a generic butterfly than anything either author really strongly said about their beauty. Okay, so it might be A though. So let's see which is the best answer. Butterflies inspire curiosity. Yeah. I found I was interested in what was going on, so it could be B. Butterflies are skilled in flight. No, it never really discussed that. Butterflies frequently face dangers. Okay, the problem is in both cases, there's the illusion of a danger, but we're never quite told that's the case. All right. So anyway, if I was to choose, I would probably choose between B and D. But since we're never quite told about D, I think B rules. And I think that's the last question about that. So there you have it. Let me flip back into this. Any final questions? So we covered a whole bunch of stuff here, and hopefully it's helpful. Any tips? Yeah, it's 8 o'clock. It's time for you to go to bed for the test in the morning. All right, guys. So I hope that was helpful. Be more specific than asking any tips, because I just gave you an hour and a half of tips. So what specific tips would you like, or at least what's the context of what you're trying to refer to? All right. So let me bring me back. Let's see here. There we go. To comprehend the passages. It's pretty much what I said. Take each paragraph or stanza one at a time. Try to figure out what the main idea of each thing is as you go through it, and also get the main idea of the whole thing. And you're also going to be underlining stuff, and because you looked at the questions beforehand, you're going to have a slight heads up about what the thing is about as well. I also did a YouTube a few days ago about the reading comprehension part as well. So if you haven't seen that, it's worth replaying it or something, just to get up to speed. I didn't really bulletize that discussion. It was just an open discussion without any visual thing to refer to it. But there's probably about 20 tips in that, about how to break things apart and approach things and pace yourself and all these different aspects. So, should I read with a pencil? I mean, slowly at first. Sure, but it depends on you. Personally, I don't do that, but I know for myself when I read. But I know some other people who are top readers who do that. So it's just what works for you. What I'd also like to say is at this point, Whatever you're used to, since your test is tomorrow, you don't necessarily want to change your strategy that strongly on that. So if you think it's going to hurt you by doing that, then don't do it. Because if you're going to do a major change in strategy at this point, it's not worth it. You should have done it a few months ago. But sure, just going along with it. Um, remember, since you only have about 10 minutes max to do a passage, um, you kind of don't want to read it twice. What you want to do is give it a good read, and as you're answering the questions, you can go look them up. And hopefully the things when you pre-read the questions and tried to guess the answer, and then when you're going to look something up, you wrote notes down or underlined something. Hopefully you can zero in right where to go. And again, you may have written on the side the main idea of each paragraph. Yeah, and some paragraphs are longer than the others, and some have tons of information. Some can almost be distracting. There's, there's so much detail on some of them. You're trying to abstract things out and get at the essence of what things are about. That's the main thing. Whether it's poems, information, um, a memoir, a newspaper article, whatever the passage happens to be. You're trying to rip out of that what the essence of things are about. And sometimes, remember, the author could be verbose, and some of the extra stuff is unnecessary. That's why you want to try to focus on each paragraph one at a time. Try to figure what the main thing happening is there, because some of it might just be noise, right? Know what I'm saying? Know what I mean? By the way, that's I know we talked about this already, but that's one reason to have a tutor, where somebody can actually personally guide you into some of the thoughts. Because at the moment, I'm not with you. I don't know how you pace things and how your brain works. Normally, I would crawl into a student's head and try to figure that out, and then we could work out a strategy. What works for you may not work for somebody else, and vice versa. So I can only give generic thoughts this second. All right, so we're winding down on this. Um, is there any final questions? I'll take at most two more questions. And again, work out your strategy. Figure out what's worth spending time on and what's not worth spending time on. Whether it's math, ELA, poems, passages, grading questions, whatever it happens to be. Just two overall categories, ELA and math, and within each just broken down. Math is grid-in and multiple choice. ELA is grammar, revision, editing, and reading comprehension. And within each of those groups, it's worth doing stuff. For instance, if you have problems figuring out commas, well, you're going to have to guess those ones and rule out the bad answers. If you're okay with commas but have a problem with poems, that's a different story. Same with the math. If you're great in probability and fractions and decimals, but you're not good at uh, graphing, then you have the choices and decisions to make. Yeah, what happens is that there's patterns, no matter what the question is, and no matter whether it's the ELA or the math. And it would have been worth seeing what the patterns were with you. But at this point, you're not really explicitly saying what the patterns are. In fact, you may not know. My mind blanks out at times when reading. Remember, some of this is psychological too, and you might be psyching yourself out. Learn how to breathe and calm down. That's important too. Remember too, if you convince yourself that you're destined to fail, then that might be self-fulfilling. But if you convince yourself that you're relaxed and you're going to get through this, then you can't. And again, I can only give you general advice a second. I would actually have to sit and watch you read and figure out, and we could to talk it the same way I narrated the poem and talked about what each paragraph is about and things like that. And we would need to talk about that. And I could, through the process of doing that, I could get into your head and figure out where maybe the bottlenecks are. But right now, it's important to have eaten dinner properly, to sleep well tonight. Don't wake up in the middle of the night. Don't wake up too early. And eat a proper breakfast and just remain calm. Learn how to breathe through the test. So everybody know how to breathe? It's worth taking a break in the test for 10 seconds or something like that. Same if you have to go to the bathroom during the test. Don't sit there in pain for 3 hours. Just go to the bathroom and get it over with. Okay, same for when you're breathing. You're gonna breathe in slowly through your nose for about 3 or 4 seconds, and then blow out like you're blowing out through a straw. Do it about 3 or 4 times, and then do that maybe once every half an hour. You're going to get oxygen in your head, which is good for thinking. You're going to relax the muscles in your body. You can also just shake about a little bit, so on, and just change your mind a bit. Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I appreciate that. But you have to deal with what you have right now. Um, I could have worked with you probably to get you an image of what you're reading about, but it's kind of involved to talk about generically again. So that's really what the issue is. I would have to observe you and discuss with you, and vice versa. You would have to discuss back with me because the reason you can't get the image might be multifold. It could be about 6 to 10 different things. It could even be the combination of some of them. Because it's like going to the doctor saying my elbow hurts, and the doctor says don't use your elbow. But why does your elbow hurt? Is there something wrong with your bone? Did you fall? Did you hit it? Do you keep doing something repeatedly with it, or pulling it, or hitting it, or whatever the case may be? Depending on exactly what happened to it, the doctor can't solve how to fix your elbow until it's known what happened to your elbow. So this is kind of that thing. You have to reach a diagnostic based on some things that happened to reach a conclusion. What you want to do too is if you're overly worried about the comprehension part, is to excel on the math part and pace that out. And maybe try to get the math done a little quicker than you have in all your other practice tests. Especially maybe this year the math is easier. Different years are harder and easier depending on what it is. Also, if you think you're good on the reading and the grammar part and the revising editing part, then just get those over with. Get those points. Leave the reading comprehension for last. And remember, a whole passage in the reading comprehension might be some of those 10 field questions. Maybe 6 to 10 of those field questions are based on one passage, and the whole passage is a field question. And that might be the toughest one of the test. And again, remember, your goal is not to answer every single question. Your goal is to get the most number of points possible. That could be by answering every question, but it also could not be by doing that. There's a whole bunch of strategies and approaches to that. Okay. All right, I think we're going to wrap up. I wish everybody good luck. Best of luck on the test tomorrow. And you all practice enough, and you might be whittling at the loose ends of here. But if your core solution set is reliable and valid, and you know your strengths and weaknesses, it'll all work out. All right. So you guys need to get to sleep so that you could be awake in the morning. All right. So again, everybody, good luck, and I'm gonna wish you guys a peace out. Let's make sure I can end this properly.